time, I'd like to call the Nance County Public Schools Board of Education to order. I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, we adopt the agenda.
Motion by Mr. Sharp,
Second.
second by Mr. Edwards. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, likewise. Motion carried. We have the task force recommendation. Dr. Ellis.
All right, so tonight, I'm going to present to you the recommendation for the reopening of this year. All right. So I'm gonna start this off by saying that I'm sure it's every educator's desire kids to be in a building. I think that when kids aren't in the building, it's different. So I just want to say that when we started looking at this reopening plan, that's what we kept in mind, that students need to be in the building, and we want to try our best possible to try to make that happen. The next thing I'm gonna say is I want to thank all the committees that worked on this. I had some board members, community members, staff surveys, parent committees, and I'm sure there are other districts that went ahead and decided what they were going to do, and I'm sorry that we're a little late, but I felt like we wanted to hear from everyone and go at every angle, because every time we met, we learned something new. So I just appreciate everybody that was on these committees. It helped us to decide what we were going to do. So I appreciate it. Next. So real quick, just briefly, this is what the state's plans were. They recommended that we either would do a B or we could go into a C. Plan A, of course, is minimal social distancing. That's when every student's in the building. But there still would be a virtual academy option. Plan B would be moderate social distancing. You would limit the density of students in the facilities, which is about half. But you would still provide a virtual academy option. Plan C would be what we did in the fall, which would be remote learning. All staff on campus, all students remote learning, but there still be a virtual option under that plan. So next slide. Go back to one. Thank you. So what we did was we had two surveys. One went out a little early, I believe it was in June, and we sent to the staff. We thought we needed to provide another one since some of the metrics had changed in the country and in the county. So we sent out another survey. Go to that next one. And most commonly used word for in our staff survey was school and students, which was very important to me because that's what we should be talking about as a school and students. The next survey, the next one is a graph of the comments of what teachers and staff felt like under the hybrid model, which is the plan B, which is, they call it half density. 41% of staff felt comfortable coming back in the building with half the students. 40% felt uncomfortable. 19% were undecided. Under a plan C, 71% felt comfortable. 11% uncomfortable, 18% were undecided. You can see here, this is just a breakdown of, you have a hybrid on one side, and then you had the teacher remote in the building on plan C is what I would call to your right. So we also asked the question, would you fall under the high risk categories that the state has deemed high risk? 53% of our staff said yes, they were high risk, where 47% said no. So that would definitely be a decision we need to think about. Here are the breakdowns of staff surveys from elementary, middle, high, central office, the total. You can kind of see how that's broken down. Next one. We had our parent advisory committee. The comments that were most, came out most were schools and virtual. So when we decide what plan we're going to do, we need to make sure we explain what the virtual academy is. So we're going to do that tonight here. So the virtual academy right now, did we miss a slide? Yeah, right now we have 3,263 students signed up for the virtual academy. And when you break that down, grade level, it kind of seems evenly distributed. Kindergarten to 12th grade seems to be all about the same amount. When you look at the school, you can tell it's every school is represented with 7% to 1. So tonight, what I'm recommending to do is go to Plan C, remote learning, which would include all staff on campus and all students remote learning, with the virtual academy option. What it would look like is online instruction for the early college and city would start August 6th. Then August 17th, we would start remote. So now we'll go into what our goal is. When you start off with a C, we feel like we would like to make a, as soon as practical is the word we're using, to a B. What we would like to do is we would attempt to phase our most vulnerable populations from face-to-face instruction, which are self-contained pre-kindergarten students, as early as September 8th. So we would like to try to start our Plan B transition slowly and bring some of those kids back in the building. The factors we're going to start considering is the metrics from the health department, because I've been in contact with them. Let us know what it looks like in Nash County, the numbers are up or down. We want to talk to the staff and see how they feel about the first 3 or 4 weeks of this plan. Student safety, do we have the equipment? And then the big issue I'm having right now is transportation, how we put the kids on buses. Because when we talked about the draft the last time, it is now gone to probably every other seat, which probably would give us about 22 kids on a bus, which is tough for an elementary school that would hold about 60, 70 kids. You're talking about multiple runs, which could be pretty tough under Plan B. So that was one of the issues we need to think about. Under the Plan B model, if we would transition, we're still going to break the school up in halves, which means you'd have a track 1 or track 2, possibly a 10. Some group would do Monday and Tuesday. Another group would do a Wednesday and Thursday, a Thursday and a Friday, just depending on how we would group them in, which transportation would be a part of that. Now, what we'd like to do is our first 20 days would be our orientations and open houses. That means we would have 20 days for schools to have orientations, open houses. It could be virtual, face-to-face. Of course, if it's face-to-face, it would have to be appointments. Teachers would have to contact students and parents to get them in. But we feel like since it's the start of a new year, students and parents would feel more comfortable meeting their teachers. So that would be the 20 days, our first 20 days, what we would try to do. I also think that that first 20 days will help teachers get acclimated to this new system, because they'll have to do temperature checks. We have to wear a face mask just like everyone else does, and that would give us enough time to get used to that new normal for them. Right now, I'm going to let Ms. Nancy Smith talk about how students' learning will look different.
Good evening. In the spring, COVID-19 took all school districts by storm. And I believe that my colleagues across the state would attest to the fact that we operated in a reactive mode. So how will student learning look differently in the spring, in the fall? So as we reflect on our accountability measures, we recognize that that's an area that we really needed to press the reset button on. So we are making a commitment to our principals, teachers, and parents that, first of all, attendance will be documented in PowerSchool daily. We will work with schools to establish two-way communication processes for our teachers and our families. Assignments will be graded with improved feedback to provide to our students and families. We will have consistent FaceTime instruction per grade span. That will range from 2 hours to 4 hours, depending on the age of the child. Curriculum resource improvements. We will have a consistent learning management system. In the education world, we use the acronym LMS. So in short, we've streamlined our digital tools. We've made sure that they're age appropriate, and when applicable, students can sign on through PowerSchools. In our elementary schools, we will use Google Classroom in grades 3 through 5. We will use Seesaw in grades K2, and we will use Canvas in all of our secondary schools. Professional development is critically important for our staff, and we will provide curriculum support. Dr. Ellis spoke previously about our concerted efforts to ensure that we provide open houses as well as orientations to our parents and students so we can train them on the resources. Recognizing the importance of the whole child, we've built in daily social and emotional lessons for all of our students, pre-K 12. And it will look differently in elementary schools as well up to high schools. When we met with the Parent Advisory Committee, you'll notice that Virtual Academy sort of stood out. And as we've gone through and looked at the comments and feedback that we're receiving on social media, as well as our district page, Virtual Academy continues to be our number one question. So what we've attempted to do is outline the difference between online learning and our Virtual Academy. So as we think about online learning, which is Plan C, remote learning, it will provide an opportunity for students to move back to in-person instruction when practical. Students will participate in learning activities with a certified teacher in person. This is called synchronous instruction. Students will also have anytime access to learning activities and can engage in these activities in a time that works for them and their families. This is a synchronous learning experience. So what that means is teachers will record their lessons so students can play those lessons back and listen to them as they need to. Graded work activities will be provided during the week. So when we think about the Virtual Academy, it is consistent, continuous online learning for our students. Students will continue in this model during the fall or during the fall as well as spring. So what this really means is we're offering our virtual academies to all families who just don't feel comfortable returning to brick and mortar. But if you look at the other 4 bullets, it's congruent to what will take place in an online Plan C learning experience, which means that students will still have access to a teacher daily for in-person instruction. One major difference is that these students have to commit to online learning for at least 1 semester. Mr. Thompson will talk to you about some options that we'll have in place as we transition to Plan B. Also, students will have access to anytime learning because we will record those lessons as well. And students will be responsible for work that will be graded and provided throughout the week. In both of these models, the following would be the same. Both learners will engage in standards-based instruction, and they'll all learn new content. There will be live instruction. Students will have an opportunity to practice, and work at their own pace. There will be rigor in both models. And we will use the same curriculum platforms, the same curriculum. Attendance will be documented daily. There will be grading of assignments, and state assessments will be required for both models. And those state expectations will be consistent with Nash County Public Schools school board policies. Mr. Thompson will talk to you about Plan C, Plan B, and the virtual academy.
So good evening. What you see on your screen is a model of what we will move to with Plan C. If you notice in the first part of the model, you see reopening, online instruction for all students. As Ms. Nancy Smith mentioned, this will include students participating in learning activities with a certified teacher at their school. Students will have access to learning activities that they can engage in during the time that works for them. And also graded work activities will be provided during the week. Notice in the model that we have transition eras working to transition into a blended learning model. This is a face-to-face and an online learning model, and this would happen as soon as practical. So we will start out with all students in online. That would be any student that even applied to the virtual academy. It would be all students. And then as we transition to the blended learning, that's where the virtual academy aspect would come in. To talk a little bit about the blended learning, face-to-face and online instruction, during this time, students will come to school on alternating weeks. Graded work activities will be provided during the week at their school. Students will participate in learning activities with certified teachers during face-to-face instruction. The child's school will manage schedules and anytime learning options. These activities are closely related to what is happening in the in-person classroom. Now, when we will transition to the blended learning, students will have the option, if they have applied for the virtual academy, to remain in the virtual academy. At that point, as we're transitioning into a blended learning model, students will have the opportunity to choose if they would like to continue with the virtual academy, if they have applied. Once again, we would like to mention that we have extended the virtual academy application to August the 10th for families to apply. In the virtual academy, students will receive instruction and support from their base school and with teachers at their school. This will be robust, some live and personalized learning experiences. Families that sign up for the virtual academy will not need to do anything new once we would transition into blended learning. This will automatically be supported and assigned from their school. Once again, I would like to mention that if a student would remain in virtual academy during the blended learning section, that student will remain in blended learning for a semester.
And so this is Chris Catalano. I'm just here to share some information about how we're going to get this information out and our plan for making sure that there's consistent messaging across all of the schools and that our school communities have all of the information available to them. So as you know, we have created a section on our new website called #NCPS Strong. And that has all of the reopening information in that section of the website. So as soon as the decision is made tonight, we have information ready to go live on the website and be shared with the public in that way. We'll also share, as we have in the past, updates on social media through all of our social media platforms. Anyone who is not linked to those social media accounts, the information is here on this slide. We encourage everybody to follow our updates on those social media platforms. And we will continue using Blackboard mass notification for voice ConnectEd messages, text messages, and email messages to both staff and students. We also, if you recall, at the end of last year, began hosting community information sessions once a month. We have plans to continue that with our first one coming up very shortly in the next couple weeks. These community information sessions will be virtual formats. They will be open to the public, so all members of the community can join. We will have a question and answer session in those community information sessions, just as we did with the face-to-face sessions. So information will be coming through our district website at ncpschools.net with links to how to access those sessions when they become available. We also are going to continue our Parent Advisory Council. Schools are adding to the list of parents that we have in our Parent Advisory Council. We're hoping to increase the number of parents that we have involved in that. Our advisory councils are invitation events. So they're not open to the public because they need to engage our parents in providing feedback for us that we can use to move forward with plans. So it's a smaller group and advisory in nature. This year, we have plans to expand beyond just parent advisory councils to include a teacher advisory council. So there will be representatives from all of our 29 schools, and administrator advisory council. We will have principals and assistant principals representing grade spans on that, and a community advisory council that we will begin as well. And we would like for all of the community members that have joined us on the task force, on the reopening task force, to continue on an advisory council with us as we go through the school year as well. Then we also have, as we've had the practice for the last several months, continuing online surveys to not only get feedback, but begin gathering information. We do have a survey that will be going out to families so that we can gather information about whether or not students will be riding the bus to school if and when we get to a point where we can transport schools into or students into the school building safely. We will also be asking families for information on whether or not they have internet access in the home so that Mr. McQueen can provide the necessary technology support for remote learning as well. We will have alternative responses for submission for these online surveys. So if a parent doesn't have access or a guardian doesn't have access to the internet, we'll be getting verbal responses and possibly paper responses as well through phone calls for the verbal responses, or if they come and make an appointment at the school to get that information. And then last but not least, we've got plans to put together over the next couple of weeks a video series on various reopening topics that will be posted to our district website, and schools will be able to use and post to their school websites on various topics related to reopening. Student and staff safety will be a topic, remote learning expectations, the learning management platforms, and more as we go through the reopening process and find relevant information that we need to share out.
So at this time, we have introduced the plan. So if you have any questions, we have some online, and we'd be glad to entertain those questions at this time.
Mr. Sharp?
Dr. Ellis, I see we have 63 people that applied for the virtual academy. What's the most that we can occupy?
Well, you know, if all went remote, then all our teachers would have to be remote. So what we're hoping is that once we get some moving back to a plan B, most of those kids were in DC, but if once we start this plan B, bringing some back in, we could decrease those numbers because they'll probably want to be back into the building. If not, what we'd have to do is each school would have to basically assign either virtual teachers, you either keep the same teacher you started with remotely. All those are going to have to, those questions are going to have to be answered when these teachers get in the building day one to figure out how many are going to stay. Do I keep my group or do we change it? So, you know, it's just going to determine how many kids want to get back in the building.
Chairman Lamb, I have a question.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I heard Dr. Catalano say that they're going to send out feedback and information surveys to collect data regarding the availability of technology in some student homes. I would like to know when that's going out because I want to be assured that we collect the data and that the students can receive technology prior to the start of the school year.
So what we're trying to do is on that 10th, which would be some work days, teachers would start calling their students, finding out where they stand on transportation, internet, are they going to show up for orientation? All of those questions should be answered that week. So they can pick up laptops. If they don't have laptops, they don't have Wi-Fi. We now have some USBs that we talked to Mr. Queen about that we can load those laptops if you don't have Wi-Fi. All those questions are going to have to be answered that first, at least within those 20 days, but we would like it to have it that first week because we need to start kids as soon as August 17th.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. This is Donovan. The Parent Advisory Council is considering expanding, and I understand it is, and I hope I'm understanding correctly, that is by invitation. Is that correct?
That is correct. Principals actually recommend at least 2 parents from their schools. We had several parents who were very active and came to just about all of our meetings last year And so we are going to expand that beyond just 2 per school so that we can make sure that the opportunity is open to as many people as possible.
I do appreciate that, and I'm happy to learn too that you're going to expand the advisory and community, but I don't want the stakeholders. The real stakeholders are the students themselves. How's our student advisory committee? I understand this technology better than a whole lot of adults.
You're absolutely right. And that actually is on our plan because students are going to have a heavy lift with this remote learning. We're going to phase that in a little bit later in the year, but we do have plans to add a student advisory council back into the mix as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
As a follow-up to Bill's, when we were listening to Mr. Thompson, I'm not sure the slide, but it's under student learning. It says a student in virtual learning must remain for the semester until courses are complete. But Chad stated they had the choice to stay in Virtual Learning Academy once we went back to a blended learning, I guess, part B, which.
So they're all gonna start remote, so everybody to me is virtual right now, even if you signed up, you're virtual. So say if we start phasing in the next 6 weeks, then we're gonna ask those students, do you want to remain virtual while we bring other students who did not sign up for virtual in? Because if you do want to stay virtual, you've gotta stay at least a semester, because that's gonna help us clear the semester, same as high school, middle school courses. That'll clean that up. You can't just keep bringing them back. They have to make a commitment so we can make sure they have the teachers and get that.
But that commitment is not made when they sign up for Virtual Academy.
We're gonna,
It's made
right.
whenever we decide
If
we want to
if
go
we
back.
decide to go into Plan B in 4 or 5 weeks, they're gonna get the option to either stay or they can come back in and play.
So that's a little bit of a change from what we.
All right. Will we need more or less staff? Or do you foresee more or less staff?
In Plan C, I think we need all we have.
More?
That's, I think if everyone shows up, then we should be fine with that.
Is there any state or federal funding for this technology piece?
Yes. CARES Act funding, second round should be coming, we hope shortly.
Okay. Cafeteria sales and employees, how's that going to affect the cash flow of the cafeteria or our food sales?
Well, if we are still, for under Plan C, we're still gonna have sites, just like we did in March. So we're gonna have feeding sites still, so that won't affect.
So that kind of answers my second question. Are we still going to be feeding?
We will be feeding. Even if we're under Plan B, we can still use, even the virtual kids could come to the sites and receive food.
Are there any grants that are in jeopardy for people not being in school?
Grant says,
Any kind of grants?
I think right now, all that's gonna be on hold until the state determines how this is gonna fold. Because there's a lot of ifs, questions we don't have answers to yet. So I don't think that's right now.
I have a parent asking that, could we please speak up? The public can't hear us well.
The question was, will we be losing any grant money? And I don't think that will be in the mix right now, Jay.
Mr. Strong, yeah, I think Mr. Jenkins.
You stated that the teachers would contact the kids. Are they gonna have some guidance if we can't, they don't have any contact? I mean, can't just tell them you need to try again, because.
So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna have social workers involved this time. I mean, we're gonna make every effort to make sure that teacher gets in contact with all those students. So there are provisions for that, because that was an issue last time where we couldn't find about 10 to 15% of our kids.
And when you just stated about when it's practical, can you like define practical? You're talking about the numbers here in Nash County?
I think what we're gonna try to do is determine after that 20 days, if the governor, lessens some of the stages that we're in right now, depending on those numbers. I talked to the health department and he said he could kind of give you some guidance that if we're going, there's a metric they use of like 5% of a district of some sort. They have a measurement that we want to try to stay. And if I feel like we're under that, then I'll come back here and we'll say, look, we're about at 5% now. We're thinking about bringing these pre-K kids in and these special education kids in. And then the next 2 or 3 weeks, if we feel like the metrics are getting decreasing, then we'll start talking about K-5.
I just like to follow up on Mr. Jenkins' question, because basically we do measure that for the state. I think we also measure for the county. So if what the state may be increased, if the county is lower, if we see the trend lower, we will follow what the county is doing. So my question was, we got the two models, the C and B plan. The initial one, everybody's gonna go remote. What about the instructors and teachers? Will they be consistent on who they got, or will they be doing remote as well as in classroom, or how are we working that?
So what we're thinking, the way this would work to be the cleanest way to work, that if a teacher starts off with 25 kids, day one, they were in plan B. Well, right now they do remote, so everybody's remote. So if we go to plan B, they still have those 25 students, but then they'll have a group, a B group, and a V group, which we virtual. So they would have those 3 groups. Or you still have the same 25. What we're going to encourage teachers to do, instead of having to teach them all different lessons, we're going to try to start recording lessons. So if a kid who's virtual has something and at 6 o'clock, he's got parents coming home, they can go to that website for that teacher, click on, and there's a recording of the lesson for that day. So that's what we're going to try to encourage teachers to do, so you don't triple your work. You're basically just filming a session in your class. And that's what we're hoping we can move forward on that. That's why we're hoping those virtual kids can understand, just come on back. We can blend them in. It'll be cleaner that way if the teacher keeps those kids.
Please give us an example. We've had teachers say they're concerned about their well-being and all. Please give us an example of, say, orientation, what the schools are going to do to keep our teachers safe.
So Mr. Farrell was on, we talked about that today, but we're going to have certain entrances in the building that you go in. We're going to have thermometer checks. Mr. Davis is buying thermal reading machines right now. That's what I call it, Mr. McLean, where it takes temperatures of so many students that come in at the same time. But teachers will have to go through the same process that students do. So they have to go through a certain door every day, get their temperature checks. They have to ask those 3 questions. They have to wear the mask. And that's why I think it's going to take 20 days to get acclimated to something like that, because as an educator, we're not used to that. And I think I don't think if we started on the 10th, teachers understand what it's going to be like and what the new normal is going to look like for a while. And I think it'll be a good transition to get them in the building, let them understand, because we've already got directions of how the building's supposed to look, where they're supposed to walk, designated bathrooms. I mean, Mr. Davis has done a real good job of getting buildings ready, all the plexiglass, and they're going to have to get used to just a new normal. And I really think, in defense of teachers, they're worried and scared now. And I think the only way to help that is to bring them in the buildings and show them for those 20 days, this is how we're going to do it, get used to it, and then you can probably start getting them more comfortable about bringing kids back in.
You have a question?
I have another question, and you may have answered, and I apologize. It's hard online to raise your hand. I had a teacher who called recently who has a health condition, a existing health condition, and she was very concerned because she was approached by a couple of parents who said, if you all go back, I'm not making my kids wear a mask. She's very nervous, and I understand that. But if they are really nervous, what is the option for a teacher? Is a possibility that they can be totally virtual, or are they gonna need to be there every day regardless?
So Ms. Privet, I know you're on, I see you on that screen right now, but I know she'll explain it better than me, but there are provisions for teachers that can do just the teleworking. But Ms. Privet, can you expound on that?
Yes, sir. Good evening, everyone. So we do have a telework agreement form for those individuals who requesting to work. And we also have an accommodations form for anyone that has an underlying health condition or if they are 65 years or older. So that employee could complete the accommodations form if they have an underlying health condition, and they would need to provide medical documentation, and that would make them eligible for teleworking as an accommodation.
Thank you.
Mr. Shaw?
Is there any special considerations for our EC students?
I think that's the first group we're going to try our best to bring in, especially the self-contained students. That's why I think for this first 20 days, our first priority will probably be pre-kindergarten, as the slide was saying, and our special education population.
So that's across the district, because we have EC students in all our schools.
Self-contained, exception.
So have we reached out to those parents to get, I'm sure we have, because they will be the first ones to embark upon this new journey. So I would like to know, have we reached out to those parents, and what are some of the comments you've gotten from those parents, as well as those teachers that's teaching those EC students?
Ms. Brand, I know you're on the line there. I see your name. So if you want to comment on that.
Sure, I will. Let me address the staff, how I got staff comments first. I actually sent out a staff survey, and I took the staff survey that was sent out by the district, extracted all the EC data and broke it out by teachers, certified staff, non-certified staff, and therapists. I also sent an email out to all of our staff who were with us last year, and actually had a virtual meeting with them. And there were about 70 people in attendance last week. And I was able to answer a lot of their questions and help them feel a lot better about things. So I've continued to answer staff questions and take feedback in looking at best practices and how can we best serve all of our students, our most vulnerable population, knowing that a virtual option is not always the absolute best option for every single one of them. Keep our staff healthy and safe, as well as our students. So that's kind of how I got their feedback. I've continued to have meetings. We have focus groups with our extended content standards, which is our self-contained classrooms as well, redoing our curriculum, and just making sure I've got my head of my autism district support team, as well as one of my program specialists and myself, walking through all of our classrooms and our self-contained classrooms, just looking through to see, do we have everything covered? Are there any additional areas that we need to put it, or things we need to put in place? From a facility standpoint, to keep the health and safety of our staff and students at the foremost of everything that we're doing. As the parents, we have had a lot of parents reach out to us. We have spoken with a lot of parents, and I'm probably about 50-50 in terms of parents who do not wish for their children to come back. Some of my children are medically fragile, and they are scared of their children being in a building with a lot of people and a lot of exposure. We are working with them to put things in place and really just meet the individual unique needs of every child. We've also got a plan for our self-contained students, depending on the metrics and guidance from the health department. We really want our students in a school building. And so we're looking at a 3, 6, and 9 week intervals where we're going to constantly reevaluate on a week by week basis and bringing them in to try to get them in the building. I think as Dr. Ellis stated, our target date to first look at is September 8th. To bring our most vulnerable population and hopefully our pre-K population back into the buildings.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Book.
As I listen to this, I am in favor, let me just say, put this out there first. I am in favor of starting school with all remote learning. I question though, I'm a little bit apprehensive about 3 weeks. The way the numbers for this virus is going up, and I've not heard the numbers for today, so I don't know if they went up today or not. I'm thinking they probably did. But if the numbers are still going up as we speak, do we have enough time? Will 3 weeks show us enough difference for us to be even thinking that we can bring our most vulnerable kids back to school? I think September 8th is too early. I think we need a longer time period because I don't want us to have our students and parents thinking that, yeah, we're going back to school on September 8th, because that date is going to be ingrained in their brains. And I don't want to have people thinking one thing and then the numbers are not that good, and we, in wisdom, should not bring kids back in 3 weeks. I would much prefer we have a 9-week period before we even tell anybody we're going to look at bringing the kids back. 3 weeks, the way this virus is going, I don't think it's going to be changed, and I don't want to give folks false hope. And I definitely don't want our children back in school when it's not safe. Even EC students, the most vulnerable ones, anybody. We don't want to have one of our kids to become ill because he's in a classroom where one of the other kids won't wear a mask. And that's exposing him even more so. So, and bottom line is, I hope we do more than 3-week intervals to look at this. I much prefer 9 weeks.
Well, we're not going to do anything if numbers are up, and I'm going to make sure that we put a date out there, which is the 20-day, because we felt like we wanted to at least try if things do change. If they don't change, I promise you, we're not going to go back. It's simple. We just wanted to have a plan to be able to move those kids if we could, because those are our most vulnerable kids, and they need, that should be the first group we even consider bringing back. So, Ms. Bullock, rest assured, we don't want anybody, right? We don't want anybody to be.
If the numbers are up, then we don't have to think about that we're going back on the 8th. We're going to take a second look and make sure the numbers are going down before we expose our kids this way. Is that what you're saying, Dr. Ellis?
Right. We're going to be following those metrics. You're right. It might not happen in those 20 days after September 8th was the date. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
Okay.
But, we just didn't want to lock in a 9 weeks knowing that it could be 6 weeks. Well, if it was 6 weeks, then we don't have to wait for 9 weeks. We could go ahead and, at least start that, because my concern is, I don't know if I want to just start gangbusters, letting everyone in with plan B. So this would at least be a start if we felt like we could move some back in. Because I also think that's going to be the comfortability level of those teachers, how they feel with those kids in the room. So there's a lot, you're right, there's a lot of unknowns, but the safety of the kids is going to be first with the teachers. So we definitely going to look at that.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Jenkins had his hands up right now. Mr.
I
Davis, I'll
can't
get
see
you
him, so
that.
that's fine.
Quick question. A lot of our teachers that may be going back to school have small kids. What are their options?
We have talked about allowing those students in the building with the teachers. We've had a conversation with the Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, so we have got some options on the table for the teachers.
Ms. Chavis.
Okay, I just had a question. I agree, I think, with Ms. Bullock's idea of letting the data and the numbers drive our decision. And I want to first compliment Dr. Ellis and your staff have put a lot of work and serious thought in this plan for us. And I want to say I do appreciate all this hard work. My question is, regardless of when we move back, and I am excited and hoping and praying that we will be getting our kids back once it's safe. If something happens, a child or a teacher reports to work and they actually are carrying this virus and we know it, we have a fallback plan. What do we do if we do go in and there is a contagious person?
We follow the same protocol just like we did if anyone's here that gets exposed. We quarantine the room. We've had to, Mr. Davis has gone to, we have fog machines now. We do contact tracing. We would do the same procedures we do when we call the health department. All that would be followed because you're right, that would come up. But if those kids were remote, then we would easily just transition that class back home and maybe stay remote for that quarantine session. Mr. Davis would clean the rooms, we would do all what we needed, we could then eventually bring it back. So, we have thought about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Ellis, just a quick question. As we do look at this thing, hopefully in phases, and I understand your desire to do this safely, but to also get people in the building when it is an option. Is there any options that would allow us to expand, if we're looking at EC and pre-K and kind of that initial wave to get some comfort with our teachers and staff, expanding that to kindergarten children, the ones that would benefit from being in the classroom as opposed to trying to do things remote?
Yes, but I think the metrics we talked about also involve teacher comments like that. If the metrics are down with COVID-19 patients and teachers are feeling more comfortable, I think we could bring more in. And I think it's going to be their comments and concerns with their principles that they raise that we possibly could bring in. Because that is the goal, is to bring more in.
Any other questions from any board member?
Just a comment. I want to piggyback on Ms. Bullock's comment as well as Ms. Chavis. But I'm really excited about the plan that Dr. Ellis and staff have put forth, because basically it's a proactive plan. We can always look forward, we can't go back. So if the numbers are not there, we had to plan. If the numbers are there, we're ready to go. So if the numbers are there, we've already got a plan, as opposed to 9 weeks, and we went out 9 weeks. So I think that's great. I think we need to, as you said earlier, stay focused on making sure we're tracking the data, and the data drives what we do.
Any other questions? I will entertain a motion to adopt the reopening plan and the task force recommendation.
So moved.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Chavis, second by Ms. Bullock. I'm going to call the roll as far as voting. Please say yes if you agree, no if you don't. Donovan Chavis?
Yes.
Dean Edwards?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Chris Visit?
Yes.
Bill Sharp?
Yes.
Link Dunn?
No.
Ricky Jenkins?
Yes.
Reggie Silver?
No.
Shonda Washington?
Yes.
Evelyn Bullock?
Yes. And I think Mr. Silver tried to answer.
there's a no for Reggie Silver.
Reggie said no.
Right.
Okay. The yeas have 8, the nays have 2. Motion passed. This time I will entertain, first of all, now that the motion is passed, I would like to thank all the stakeholders that have been involved in setting up this reopening plan. There's no telling how many hours, how many airlocks or whatever. I know there's a lot of thought that's been going in with the utmost goal, the safety of our students and our teachers. I would like to thank everybody involved for a job well done. I know we've waited a little longer than some school systems, but I think the proof is in the pudding. Thank you, Dr. Ellis. Thank you. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to go in closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I make the motion, we go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11, A1, A3, and A6 to prevent the disclosure of confidential personnel files under General Statute 115C-321 to consider matters relating to the initial employment of an individual employee, to prevent the disclosure of confidential student records under General Statute 115C-402, and to consult with the board's attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege.
Motion by Mr. Dunn. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Sharp. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, likewise. Motion carried. We will now go into closed session. Take about a 3-minute break.